that flickered in hurricane glasses. The hostess greeted him with a smile that seemed rehearsed, and he tugged at the collar of his button-down shirt, the only one he owned that didn't have paint stains or frayed cuffs. He'd ironed it twice that afternoon while Emma sat on the couch, watching him with wide, serious eyes. "You look fancy, Daddy," she'd said. "I look ridiculous," he'd muttered back. But here he was anyway, because his sister Rachel had cornered him 3 weeks ago and refused to let it go. "You're 32, not dead," she'd said, standing in his kitchen with her arms crossed. "One dinner, that's all I'm asking. Just meet her. If it's awful, you never have to do it again." He'd agreed mostly to shut her up, but also because some small, stubborn part of him wondered if maybe, just maybe, things could be different. That part of him was about to get crushed. The hostess led him to a table near the window where a woman was already seated. She looked up as he approached, and Daniel felt his stomach drop. She was stunning in a cold, untouchable way. Blonde hair swept into a tight bun, sharp cheekbones, a black dress that probably cost more than his truck payment. Her eyes scanned him from head to toe in less than 2 seconds, and he watched her expression shift from neutral to faintly disappointed. "Daniel?" she asked, her voice clipped. "That's me." He pulled out his chair and sat down, trying to ignore the way she was still looking at him, like he'd tracked mud across her carpet. "You must be Chloe." "I am." She didn't smile. She reached for her wine glass, already half empty, and took a sip. "Rachel didn't mention you worked construction." Daniel blinked. "I'm a mechanic, actually. At a shop in—" "Same difference," she waved a hand. "Manual labor." The words hung in the air between them, sharp and dismissive. Daniel felt heat creep up the back of his neck, but he swallowed it down. This was already going poorly, and they hadn't even ordered appetizers. "So," he said, forcing his voice to stay even, "Rachel said you work in marketing?" "Brand strategy," Chloe corrected, "for a consulting firm. We handle major corporate accounts, rebranding, market positioning, that sort of thing. It's very demanding." She leaned back in her chair, studying him again. "I travel a lot. Paris last month, Tokyo next week." "That sounds busy." "It is." She paused, then tilted her head slightly. "Rachel mentioned you have a daughter." There it was. Daniel had known it would come up. It always did, but the way she said it made his jaw tighten. Like Emma was a footnote, a complication. "Yeah," he said carefully. "Emma. She's 6. Chloe's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes did. A flicker of calculation, maybe, or judgment. She took another sip of wine. "That must be, challenging." "It's the best thing that ever happened to me." "I'm sure," Chloe said, in a tone that suggested she was absolutely not sure. She set her glass down and folded her hands on the table. "Look, Daniel, I appreciate Rachel setting this up, but I should be honest with you. I'm at a point in my life where I'm very focused on my career. I don't really have the bandwidth for—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Complications." Daniel stared at her. "Complications. Children are a lot of work," Chloe said, as if she were explaining basic math. "And I don't date men with baggage, especially the kind that needs a babysitter." The words landed like a slap. For a moment, Daniel didn't move. He just sat there, feeling the familiar weight settle over him. The same weight he'd carried since Emma's mother walked out when she was 8 months old. The weight of being too much, of being not enough, of being the guy women looked at and decided wasn't worth the effort. He should have been used to it by now. But it still stung. "Right," he said quietly. He pushed his chair back and stood, pulling his wallet from his pocket. He dropped 2 20s on the table, enough to cover her wine and then some. "Well, thanks for your honesty. Enjoy your trip to Tokyo." Chloe blinked, startled. "Wait, you're leaving?" "Yeah." Daniel gave her a tight smile. "I've got an early morning, and you've got a busy life. No point wasting each other's time." He turned and walked away before she could respond, weaving through the tables toward the exit. His heart was pounding, and his hands felt shaky, and all he wanted was to get out of this place and back to his truck and— "Excuse me." The voice came from his left, calm and clear. Daniel stopped and turned. A woman was sitting at the table next to where he'd been. She was looking directly at him, her expression unreadable. She was younger than Chloe, maybe 30, with dark hair pulled into a loose ponytail and sharp, intelligent eyes. She wore a simple gray blouse and no jewelry except for a thin silver watch. There was a laptop open in front of her, and a glass of red wine sat untouched beside it. "I'm sorry," Daniel said, confused. You don't know me," the woman said. She closed her laptop and leaned back in her chair, studying him with the same quiet intensity he'd just escaped from Chloe. But this felt different. Less like judgment, more like curiosity. "But I couldn't help overhearing your conversation." Daniel's stomach twisted. Great. A witness to his humiliation. "Yeah, well, it wasn't much of a conversation." "No," the woman agreed. "It wasn't." She paused, then gestured to the empty chair across from her. "Would you like to sit down?" Daniel stared at her. "What?" "Sit down," she repeated, "if you're not in a rush." He glanced back toward the exit, then at Chloe, who was now staring at her phone with a scowl, then back at the stranger, who was still watching him with that calm, unreadable expression. "Why?" The corner of her mouth lifted just slightly. "Because you look like you could use a better conversation, and because I'm curious about you." There was something in the way she said it, straightforward, unguarded, that made Daniel hesitate. He should have left. He should have gone home, kissed Emma goodnight, and forgotten this entire disaster of an evening. But instead, he pulled out the chair and sat down. "I'm Victoria," the woman said, extending her hand. "Daniel!" He shook it. Her grip was firm, confident. "So Daniel," Victoria said, folding her hands on the table. "Tell me about your daughter." For the next hour, Daniel forgot he was sitting in a restaurant that was too nice for him. Victoria didn't ask the polite surface-level questions people usually asked when they were trying to be nice about the whole single dad thing. She didn't tiptoe around it or change the subject quickly. She leaned forward, genuinely interested, and asked him real questions. "What's her name?" "Emma." "What's she like?" Daniel felt himself smile without meaning to. "She's stubborn and smart. Too smart sometimes. She asks a million questions about everything. Last week she wanted to know why the sky changes colors at sunset, and I had to look it up because I had no idea." Victoria's eyes crinkled at the corners. "Did you figure it out?" "Yeah." "Something about light scattering and wavelengths?" She nodded like it made perfect sense, and then asked if we could paint her room the same colors. He laughed softly. "We're still negotiating." "She sounds wonderful." "She is." Daniel's smile faded slightly. "She's the reason I get up every day, the reason I work as hard as I do, the reason—" He stopped himself, shaking his head. "Sorry, I'm probably boring you." "You're not," Victoria said simply. Daniel looked at her, really looked at her, and realized she meant it. There was no pity in her expression, no condescension, just attention. "What about you?" he asked. "What do you do?" "I run a company," Victoria said. "Tech consulting and software development. We work with schools and educational nonprofits mostly." Daniel raised his eyebrows. "You're a CEO." "I am." "That's impressive." "It's demanding," Victoria said, echoing Chloe's words from earlier, but the tone was entirely different. "But I love it. I get to work with people who are trying to make real changes in education. It's not always easy, but it's worth it." "Do you travel a lot?" Victoria smiled faintly. "Sometimes. But I try to stay grounded, literally and figuratively." She paused, then tilted her head. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why did you agree to that date tonight, if you don't mind me asking?" Daniel let out a breath. "My sister set it up. She thinks I need to get out more. Meet people. Stop." He trailed off, then shrugged. "Stop being alone, I guess." "And what do you think?" "I think," Daniel said slowly, "that most people don't want to deal with a guy who has a kid. And I get it. It's complicated. It's messy. But Emma's not going anywhere, and I wouldn't want her to. So if that's a deal breaker—" He gestured vaguely toward Chloe's table. "Then, yeah, I'm probably going to be alone." Victoria was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I don't think being a father is a deal breaker. I think it's the opposite." Daniel blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Victoria said, her voice steady, "that raising a child on your own takes more strength and patience than most people will ever have. It's not baggage. It's proof that you're capable of something most people aren't." The words hit him harder than he expected. He looked down at his hands, suddenly unsure what to say. "Thank you," he managed finally. Victoria nodded. "You're welcome." They kept talking. The conversation drifted from Emma to work to small, surprising details about their lives. Victoria told him about growing up in a family of engineers, about how she'd always been drawn to problem solving. Daniel told her about fixing his first car at 16, about how he'd never planned to be a mechanic but had fallen into it and found he was good at it. It was easy, comfortable, the kind of conversation that didn't feel like work. At some point, the waiter came by and asked if they wanted to order food. Victoria ordered pasta. Daniel ordered the same, mostly because he hadn't looked at the menu. The food came and went, and they kept talking through it, the plates pushed aside as the restaurant began to empty around them. "Do you have a picture of her?" Victoria asked eventually. Daniel pulled out his phone without hesitation. He scrolled through his photos. Most of them were of Emma, and found one from last weekend. Emma was standing in the backyard, grinning at the camera with dirt on her cheek and a dandelion clutched in one hand. He handed the phone to Victoria. She studied the photo for a long moment, her expression softening. "She has your smile." "Yeah," Daniel said quietly. "Poor kid." Victoria looked up at him, and for the first time all night, she smiled, really smiled. "I think she's lucky." Daniel's chest tightened. They stayed until the restaurant closed. The waiter brought the check with a polite but pointed cough, and Daniel reached for his wallet before Victoria could move. "Let me get this," he said. "Absolutely not," Victoria said firmly. "I invited you to sit down. This one's on me." Daniel started to argue, but the look on her face told him he wouldn't win. He let it go. Outside, the air was cool and quiet. The street was mostly empty, just a few cars passing by, and the distant hum of the city settling into night. They stood on the sidewalk, and for a moment neither of them spoke. "This was nice," Victoria said finally. "Yeah," Daniel agreed. "It was." She looked at him, her expression unreadable again. "Can I ask you something else?" "Go ahead." "Would you want to do this again sometime?" Daniel's heart kicked hard against his ribs. "Seriously?" "Seriously." He hesitated. Not because he didn't want to, he absolutely wanted to, but because he'd been here before. The hope, the possibility, the inevitable letdown when reality crashed in. But then he thought about the last 2 hours, about the way Victoria had listened to him talk about Emma without flinching, about the way she'd smiled at that photo. "Yeah," he said, "I'd like that." Victoria pulled out her phone. "Give me your number." He did, and she sent him a text so he'd have hers. "I'll be in touch," she said. "Okay." She turned to leave, then stopped and looked back at him. "Daniel?" "Yeah?" "That woman you were with earlier?" Victoria's voice was calm, but there was something sharp beneath it. She was wrong. About all of it. Daniel didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded. Victoria gave him one last small smile, then walked away, disappearing into the night. Daniel stood there for a while, his phone still in his hand, replaying the entire evening in his head. He didn't know what had just happened. He didn't know if Victoria was serious about seeing him again, or if this was just a kind gesture from a stranger who'd felt sorry for him. But for the first time in a long time, he felt something other than resignation. He felt hope. The next morning, Daniel woke up to Emma jumping on his bed. "Daddy! Daddy, wake up! It's breakfast time!" He groaned and pulled the pillow over his face. "Emma, it's Saturday. We don't have to be up this early." "But I'm hungry," Daniel peeked out from under the pillow. Emma was standing on the mattress in her pajamas, bright pink with cartoon unicorns, her hair sticking up in every direction. She was grinning down at him, her gap-toothed smile infectious. All right, he muttered, sitting up. "What do you want?" "Pancakes." "Pancakes it is." They went downstairs and Daniel started pulling out ingredients while Emma climbed onto her stool at the kitchen counter. She chattered the entire time, telling him about a dream she'd had involving a dragon and a spaceship, and Daniel listened while he mixed batter and heated the pan. This was his life. Simple, predictable, safe. But last night had felt like a crack in that safety. A glimpse of something else. His phone buzzed on the counter. He glanced at it, expecting a message from Rachel asking how the date went. Instead, it was from Victoria. "Good morning. I hope you slept well. Are you free Monday afternoon?" Daniel stared at the screen. "Daddy?" Emma's voice pulled him back. You're burning the pancake. Shit, shoot. He flipped the pancake quickly, grimacing at the dark edges. Emma giggled. He set the phone down and focused on breakfast, but his mind was already somewhere else. Monday afternoon. He'd have to check his schedule at the shop, see if he could move things around. He picked up the phone again and typed out a reply. Yeah, I'm free. What did you have in mind? The response came a few minutes later. There's something I'd like to show you. I'll send you the address. Daniel frowned slightly. Cryptic. But he was curious. Okay. What time? 2 p.m.? Works for me. He set the phone down and slid a pancake onto Emma's plate. She drowned it in syrup and dug in, humming happily. Daddy? She said between bites. Yeah, kiddo? You seem happy today. Daniel looked at her, surprised. I do? Emma nodded. You smiled when you looked at your phone. He hadn't realized, but she was right. He had smiled. Maybe I am, he said softly. Emma beamed at him. Good. You should smile more. Monday came faster than Daniel expected. He spent Sunday with Emma, playground, library, pizza for dinner, and tried not to think too hard about what Monday would bring. But by the time he dropped Emma off at Rachel's house Monday afternoon, his nerves were buzzing. So, Rachel said, blocking the doorway with her arms crossed, how did it go with Chloe? It didn't, Daniel said flatly. Rachel's face fell. What do you mean it didn't? I mean, she made it very clear that I wasn't her type, or that Emma wasn't. Same thing. He shrugged. It's fine, I left early. Daniel, it's fine, Rachel. He softened his tone. Really? It just wasn't a good fit. Rachel sighed, looking guilty. I'm sorry, I know what you thought, and I appreciate it, but you don't have to keep trying to set me up. I'm okay. Rachel studied him for a moment, then narrowed her eyes. You're going somewhere right now, aren't you? Daniel hesitated. Maybe. Who is she? Nobody, just someone I met. It's not a big deal. Rachel's expression shifted from concern to something dangerously close to hope. Daniel Brooks, are you going on a date? No, he said quickly. It's not a date. It's just meeting up. Uh-huh. Rachel grinned. Fine, don't tell me. But you better tell me everything later. There's nothing to tell. Sure there isn't. She stepped aside and let him pass. Emma's already playing with the boys. Go have fun on your not date. Daniel shook his head and left before she could interrogate him further. The address Victoria had sent him was across town, in a neighborhood he didn't know well. When he pulled up, he realized it was a school. A nice one with a sprawling campus and freshly painted buildings. A sign out front read, Westridge Academy, Empowering Young Minds. Daniel parked and climbed out of his truck, feeling out of place again. He pulled out his phone and texted Victoria. I'm here. Where are you? A minute later, she appeared from around the side of the main building. She was dressed casually today, jeans, a white blouse, her hair down and loose around her shoulders. She looked different, softer. Hi, she said, walking over. Hi. Daniel glanced around. So, a school? Victoria smiled. Come with me, I'll explain. She led him through the front entrance and down a hallway lined with bright, colorful murals. Kids' artwork hung on the walls, drawings of animals and families and houses with crooked chimneys. It reminded him of Emma's drawings, the ones taped to their fridge at home. They stopped outside a classroom with big windows looking into a space full of tiny chairs and bookshelves. A few kids were inside, working on art projects while a teacher circulated among them. This is a partner program I've been working on, Victoria said quietly. We provide technology and educational resources to schools that don't have the budget for it. This is one of our pilot sites. Daniel looked at her. You run this? I oversee it, yeah. We're testing new learning software here, interactive tools for early childhood education. She paused, watching the kids. I spend a lot of time here, more than I probably should. That's amazing, Daniel said honestly. Victoria glanced at him, something uncertain flickering in her expression. There's something else I need to tell you. Okay? She took a breath. Starting next week, I'm going to be here even more. We're launching a new phase of the program, and I'll be leading some of the classroom activities myself. working directly with the kids. She hesitated. And I wanted you to know because Emma's going to be starting here next week. Daniel froze. What? Victoria nodded. I saw her name on the enrollment list this morning. I didn't realize it until after we made plans to meet, but yeah. She's enrolled in the kindergarten program here. Daniel's mind was racing. Emma's new school, the one Rachel had helped him apply to because the public school near their house was overcrowded and underfunded. He'd been thrilled when she got in. He hadn't thought to ask about the details. You're going to be her teacher? He asked slowly. Not her primary teacher, no, Victoria said quickly, but I'll be in her classroom sometimes. Running activities? Working with the kids? She met his eyes. I wanted to tell you now because, I don't know. It felt like something you should know. Daniel didn't know what to say. Victoria looked down at her hands. I also need to tell you something else. Okay, Daniel said again, though his stomach was starting to twist. I have a rule, Victoria said quietly. I don't get involved romantically with parents, not when their kids are connected to my work. It's a boundary I set a long time ago, and I don't break it. The words landed heavily. Why? Daniel asked. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Then she said, because I made a mistake once. I let my personal life cross into my professional life, and it almost destroyed everything I'd built. Someone got hurt. A program I cared about got shut down, and I swore I'd never let that happen again. Daniel watched her, seeing the tension in her shoulders, the way she wouldn't quite meet his eyes. So what does that mean for us? He asked carefully. It means, Victoria said, her voice steady but sad, that we can't do this. Not while Emma's here. Not while I'm working with her. Daniel felt something sink in his chest. Right. I'm sorry, Victoria said. I really am. I didn't know when I asked you to sit down Friday night, and I should have checked before I asked you to meet me today. But I wanted you to hear it from me, before you saw me at the school, and it's okay, Daniel said, cutting her off gently. I get it. Victoria looked up at him, and the sadness in her eyes was real. I meant what I said, that night, about you, about Emma. I know, Daniel said. They stood there in the hallway, the sound of children's laughter drifting from the classroom behind them. I should go, Daniel said finally. Victoria nodded. Yeah. He turned to leave, but then stopped and looked back. For what it's worth, I think your rule makes sense, and I respect it. Victoria gave him a small, grateful smile. Thank you. Daniel walked out of the school and back to his truck. He sat in the driver's seat for a long time, staring at the building, feeling the strange, heavy weight of something that had almost been. And then he drove home. Emma's first day at Westridge Academy started with a meltdown over socks. These ones are itchy, she wailed, throwing a balled-up pair across her bedroom. I can't wear itchy socks on my first day. Daniel crouched down, picking up the rejected socks and holding them like evidence in a trial. Emma, we've been through your entire drawer. These are the same socks you wore last week. They weren't itchy last week. He closed his eyes and counted to 5. It was 7:30 in the morning. He hadn't finished his coffee, and they needed to leave in 20 minutes. Okay, how about the blue ones? The blue ones have a seam. All socks have seams, kiddo. Emma's face crumpled, and Daniel could see the tears coming. Real ones this time, not the theatrical kind she deployed when she wanted ice cream before dinner. She was scared. The socks weren't really about the socks. He sat down on the floor beside her. Hey, come here. She crawled into his lap, burying her face against his chest. He wrapped his arms around her and waited. What if nobody likes me? She whispered. They're going to love you. What if the teacher is mean? She won't be. What if I don't know how to do the work? Daniel pulled back just enough to look at her. Then you'll learn. That's why you're going to school. And if it's hard, you'll try your best, and that's all anyone can ask. He smoothed her hair back. And if you get really scared or really sad, you can tell me when I pick you up and we'll figure it out together. Okay? Emma sniffled. Okay. Now, the blue socks or the pink ones? Pink. Good choice. He kissed the top of her head and stood, pulling her up with him. Let's get moving, or we're going to be late. 20 minutes later, they were in the truck. Emma buckled into her booster seat with her new backpack, purple with stars, clutched on her lap. She was quiet the whole drive, staring out the window, and Daniel kept glancing at her in the rearview mirror. When they pulled into the parking lot at Westridge, his stomach tightened. He'd been trying not to think about this moment all weekend, about the fact that he was going to walk Emma into this building and possibly see Victoria, about the fact that he had no idea how to act if he did. Professional, polite, distant. It sounded simple. It felt impossible. He parked and came around to help Emma out of the truck. She took his hand without being asked, gripping it tightly as they walked toward the main entrance. Other parents were doing the same thing, ushering nervous kids through the doors, some of the kids crying, some chattering excitedly. Emma just held on and said nothing. Inside, a cheerful woman with a clipboard directed them toward the kindergarten wing. Daniel followed the signs, Emma's hand still locked in his, until they reached a bright classroom with a banner over the door that read, "Welcome to Miss Carver's class." A young woman with curly red hair and a sunny smile greeted them at the door. "Good morning. You must be Emma." Emma nodded, not letting go of Daniel's hand. "I'm Miss Carver," the woman said, crouching down to Emma's level. "I'm so excited you're here. We've got a spot saved just for you." She pointed to a table near the window where a few other kids were already seated, working on name tags. "Do you want to come see?" Emma looked up at Daniel. He squeezed her hand. "Go ahead. I'll be right here." She let go slowly and took a tentative step toward Miss Carver, who stood and held out her hand. Emma took it, glancing back at Daniel one more time before letting herself be led into the classroom. Daniel stood in the doorway, watching as Miss Carver got Emma settled at the table and handed her a marker. Another little girl immediately started talking to her, pointing at the name tag, and Emma smiled, small but real. "She'll be okay." The voice came from behind him. Daniel turned and felt his heart kick against his ribs. Victoria was standing a few feet away, holding a tablet and wearing a soft gray sweater and black slacks. Her hair was pulled back in a low ponytail, and she looked calm and professional and completely in her element. "Yeah," Daniel said, his voice coming out rougher than he intended. "I think so." Victoria's eyes flicked to Emma, then back to him. "First day is always hard." "For her or for me?" A faint smile crossed her face. "Both." They stood there for a moment, the hallway buzzing with parents and kids moving past them. Daniel didn't know what to say. Every instinct told him to ask how she was, to make a joke, to find some way to keep her talking, but he remembered what she'd said, the boundary, the rule. "I should let you get to work," he said. "Right." Victoria nodded, but she didn't move. "Daniel?" A voice interrupted from down the hall. "Miss Lane, do you have a second?" Victoria glanced over her shoulder. A man in a suit, probably the principal, was waving her over. She looked back at Daniel, something unreadable flickering in her expression. "I'll see you around," she said quietly. "Yeah, see you." She walked away, and Daniel watched her go before turning back to the classroom. Emma was bent over her name tag, tongue poking out in concentration. She didn't notice him still standing there. He forced himself to leave. The days blurred together after that. Daniel fell into a new routine. Drop Emma off at 7:45, work a full shift at the shop, pick her up at 3:30. Emma came home each day with stories about Miss Carver and her new friend Lily and the guinea pig in the classroom named Mr. Nibbles. She was happy, thriving even, and Daniel was doing fine. Except for the moments when he'd arrive at pickup and see Victoria in the hallway, talking to a teacher or crouched down beside a kid, her expression patient and focused. She never looked his way. He told himself that was good. Professional. It didn't feel good. 2 weeks in, Emma came running out of the classroom with a piece of paper clutched in her hand. "Daddy, Daddy, look!" Daniel took the paper. It was a drawing, stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. One tall figure, one small. "Is this us?" "Yeah, and look!" She pointed to a corner of the page where someone had written in neat handwriting. "Beautiful work, Emma. You're a wonderful artist." "Who wrote that?" Daniel asked, though he already knew. He recognized the handwriting from the text messages he'd deleted but hadn't really forgotten. "Ms. Lane," Emma said brightly. "She comes to our class sometimes and does activities with us. She's really nice. She said I'm good at drawing." Daniel's chest tightened. "That's great, kiddo." "Can we put it on the fridge?" "Absolutely." That night, after Emma was asleep, Daniel stood in the kitchen staring at the drawing now stuck to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a dinosaur. He thought about Victoria's handwriting, about the fact that she'd taken the time to write that note, about the fact that she was in Emma's classroom, seeing her, talking to her, while he stood on the other side of a line he couldn't cross. He grabbed a beer from the fridge and went out to the back porch. The air was cool, the yard dark, except for the glow from the kitchen window. He sat on the steps and drank slowly, trying not to think. His phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. "How's Emma doing at the new school?" he typed back. "Good. She loves it." "And how are you doing?" Daniel stared at the screen. Rachel had a sixth sense for when he was struggling. He thought about lying, but she'd see through it anyway. "I'm fine." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. "You're a terrible liar." He sighed and called her. "All right," Rachel said the second she picked up. "What's going on?" "Nothing's going on." "Daniel." He leaned back against the porch railing. "You remember that not date I went on a couple weeks ago? The one you refused to tell me about?" "Yes." "It was with someone I met the night of the Chloe disaster." Rachel was quiet for a beat. "Okay. And?" "And she's great. Smart. Interesting. Easy to talk to. We hit it off." "That sounds like a good thing." "It was." Daniel rubbed a hand over his face. "Until I found out she works at Emma's school, and she has this rule about not getting involved with parents." "Oh. Yeah." Rachel let out a long breath. "So what are you going to do?" "Nothing. Respect her boundary. Keep my distance. Be a normal, functional adult about it." "And how's that going?" Daniel laughed bitterly. "Fantastic. Have you talked to her since you found out?" "Not really. I see her sometimes at pickup. It's not like we avoid each other, but we're not talking either." "That sounds miserable." "It is what it is." Rachel was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You know, when Emma's mom left, I thought you were going to fall apart. But you didn't. You just kept going. Took care of Emma, kept working, built this whole life for the two of you. And I was so proud of you, but I also worried." "About what?" "That you'd forgotten you're allowed to want things for yourself. Not just for Emma. For you." Daniel didn't know what to say to that. "I'm not saying you should push her," Rachel continued. "If she has a boundary, you respect it. But don't convince yourself you don't deserve to be happy, because you do." "I am happy." "Are you?" Daniel closed his eyes. "I have Emma. That's enough." "It doesn't have to be either or, Daniel." They talked for a few more minutes before Rachel had to go deal with one of her boys having a nightmare. Daniel stayed outside, finishing his beer and staring at the dark yard. Maybe Rachel was right. Maybe he'd spent so long just surviving that he'd forgotten what it felt like to want something. But wanting didn't change the situation. Victoria had her reasons. He had Emma to think about. And some things just weren't meant to work out. 3 weeks into the school year, the classroom hosted a parent event, an evening showcase where the kids would present projects they'd been working on. Emma had been talking about it nonstop for days. She'd made a poster about dolphins and had practiced her presentation in front of Daniel at least a dozen times. "They can dive really deep," she'd recited, pointing at the pictures she'd glued onto poster board. "And they're really smart, almost as smart as people." "You're going to do great," Daniel had told her. Now he stood in the back of Miss Carver's classroom, surrounded by other parents, watching Emma stand in front of her poster with her hands clasped nervously. Lily stood beside her with a poster about butterflies, and the two of them took turns presenting. Emma stumbled over a few words, but she smiled the whole time, and when she finished, the parents clapped. Daniel's chest felt too tight. He was so damn proud of her. After the presentations, there was a reception in the hallway, cookies and juice boxes and coffee that tasted like it had been sitting in a pot since morning. Daniel stood with a styrofoam cup, half listening to another parent talk about soccer sign-ups, when he felt someone approach. He turned. Victoria was standing beside him, holding her own cup of terrible coffee. "She did really well," Victoria said quietly. Daniel nodded. "Yeah, she's been practicing all week." "I could tell." Victoria's lips curved slightly. "Dolphins are apparently very smart, almost as smart as people." They stood there in silence, the noise of the reception swirling around them. Daniel wanted to say something, anything, but every possible sentence felt too heavy. Victoria spoke first. "How are you doing?" "I'm okay." He glanced at her. "You?" "Busy, The program's expanding faster than I expected, but it's good. That's good. Another pause. This was excruciating. Daniel, Ms. Lane, a woman's voice cut through the conversation. One of the other parents was waving Victoria over, holding a crying toddler on her hip. Can I ask you about the registration form? Victoria's expression shifted, professional, helpful. She looked at Daniel. Yeah, go ahead. She hesitated for just a second, then walked away. Daniel watched her go, feeling the same hollow ache he'd been carrying for weeks. Emma appeared at his side, tugging on his sleeve. Daddy, can I have another cookie? Sure, kiddo. He followed her to the snack table and tried to focus on the fact that his daughter was happy. That was what mattered. October came, and with it, a string of school events that Daniel couldn't avoid. Harvest Festival, book fair, parent-teacher conferences. Each one meant another chance to see Victoria from across a room, to exchange polite nods, to feel the weight of everything unsaid. At the parent-teacher conference, Miss Carver told him that Emma was doing wonderfully. She's bright, engaged, kind to the other kids. Honestly, she's a joy to have in class. That's great to hear, Daniel said, meaning it. And I know Miss Lane has been working with her on some of the interactive learning modules, Miss Carver continued. Emma really responds well to her. Daniel's throat tightened. Yeah, Emma talks about her a lot. Miss Carver smiled. Ms. Lane has a real gift with kids. We're lucky to have her involved in the program. After the conference, Daniel found Emma in the hallway playing a hand-clapping game with Lily. He watched for a moment, letting the tension drain out of his shoulders. Ready to go? He asked. Emma looked up. Can Lily come over for a play date? Lily's mom, who'd been standing nearby, laughed. They've been plotting this all week. Daniel smiled. Sure, how about Saturday? Perfect. They exchanged numbers and Daniel herded Emma toward the exit. As they walked through the hallway, he saw Victoria standing near the front office, talking to the principal. She glanced up, and their eyes met for just a second. She looked away first. Outside, Emma climbed into the truck and chattered about her day. Daniel drove home on autopilot, his mind elsewhere. That night, after Emma was in bed, he sat at the kitchen table with his laptop, scrolling through work emails he didn't really care about. His phone sat beside him, dark and silent. He opened his messages and found the thread with Victoria. The last text was from weeks ago, her address for the school. He stared at it, his thumb hovering over the keyboard. He could text her, just something simple, friendly. But what would that accomplish? She'd set a boundary. He needed to respect it. He closed the messages and set the phone down. The weeks crawled forward. Halloween came and went. Emma dressed as an astronaut and filled a plastic pumpkin with candy. Thanksgiving break arrived, and Daniel took Emma to Rachel's house for dinner, where she ran wild with her cousins and ate too much pie. You look tired, Rachel said, cornering him in the kitchen while the kids played in the living room. I'm fine. You've been saying that a lot lately. Daniel leaned against the counter. What do you want me to say, Rach? I want you to admit that you're not fine, that this thing with Victoria is eating at you. It doesn't matter if it's eating at me. There's nothing I can do about it. Rachel crossed her arms. Have you tried talking to her? Actually talking, not just awkward small talk in the hallway? What's the point? She made herself clear. The point, Rachel said firmly, is that you deserve to at least tell her how you feel. Not to change her mind, just to be honest. Daniel looked at his sister. And what if that makes things worse? How could they be worse than they are now? He didn't have an answer for that. December arrived with cold rain and early darkness. The school announced a winter celebration, an evening event with performances by the kids and a fundraiser for the educational program. Emma was going to sing in the choir, and she'd been practicing her song every night, belting out slightly off-key renditions of jingle-themed classics. Daniel bought tickets and tried to muster up enthusiasm. Emma had enough for both of them. The night of the celebration, the school gym was packed. Parents filled the folding chairs set up in rows, and the stage at the front was decorated with paper snowflakes and string lights. Daniel found a seat near the middle and watched as the kids filed onto the stage in their makeshift costumes, construction paper reindeer antlers, and cotton ball snowmen. Emma spotted him from the stage and waved so hard she nearly hit the kid next to her. Daniel waved back, grinning despite himself. The choir started singing, and Emma's voice rose above the others, not quite on key, but loud and full of confidence. Daniel's chest ached with pride. When the performance ended, the principal took the stage and gave a speech about the partnership program and how much it had meant to the school. Then she introduced Victoria. Daniel's pulse kicked up as Victoria walked onto the stage. She looked composed, professional, her voice steady as she talked about the program's goals and the progress they'd made. She thanked the teachers, the parents, the kids. She didn't look at the audience, not really, but Daniel felt like every word was meant for him anyway. When she finished, the applause was loud and genuine. She smiled, brief, reserved, and stepped off the stage. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Emma found him afterward, still wearing her cotton ball snowman hat, and dragged him to the refreshment table. They ate cookies and drank punch, and Emma introduced him to what felt like every kid in her class. He was talking to Lily's mom again when he saw Victoria standing near the gym doors, alone, holding a cup of punch and looking at her phone. "Excuse me," he said to Lily's mom, and before he could talk himself out of it, he walked over. Victoria looked up as he approached. Surprise flickered across her face. "Daniel?" "Hey." "Hi." They stood there, the noise of the gym fading into the background. Daniel's heart was pounding, and he had no idea what he was going to say. "That was a good speech," he started. "Thank you." She hesitated. "Emma did great up there." "Yeah, she's got confidence. I'll give her that." Victoria smiled faintly. "She gets that from you." The words caught him off guard. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the same exhaustion he'd been carrying reflected in her eyes. "Victoria, Daniel, They both stopped. Victoria let out a breath. "You first." Daniel swallowed. I wanted to say that I get it. Your rule, your boundary. And I respect it. But I also wanted you to know that these past few months have been harder than I expected. Not because of anything you did, just because..." He stopped, trying to find the right words. "Because I haven't been able to stop thinking about you." Victoria's expression shifted, something fragile and unguarded breaking through the professional calm. "Daniel, I'm not asking you to change your mind," he said quickly. "I'm not trying to make things difficult. I just needed to say it, once, so I could stop carrying it around." Victoria was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. "I think about you too." The admission hit him like a punch. "Yeah?" "Yeah." She looked down at her cup. "More than I should." "Then why?" "Because I can't," she said, her voice firmer now. "I can't let myself. Not while Emma's here. Not while I'm part of her school life. I made a promise to myself, and I have to keep it." Daniel nodded slowly. "Okay." "But..." She hesitated, then met his eyes. "The program ends in May, when the school year finishes." His heart stuttered. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," Victoria said carefully, "that maybe in June things could be different." Daniel stared at her. "Are you serious?" "I don't know," she admitted. "Maybe I'm being unfair, asking you to wait. But I wanted you to know that it's not that I don't want to. It's just that I can't. Not yet." "June," Daniel repeated. "June." He didn't know if 6 months was a long time or no time at all, but it was something, a possibility where before there'd been nothing. "Okay," he said. "June." Victoria's shoulders relaxed slightly, and for the first time in months she smiled at him, really smiled. "Okay." "Daddy!" Emma's voice rang out from across the gym. She was waving at him, jumping up and down. Daniel glanced back at her, then at Victoria. "I should go," Victoria said. "I'll see you around." He nodded and started to walk away, but then stopped and turned back. "Victoria?" "Yeah?" "Thank you for telling me." She nodded. "Thank you for understanding." Daniel walked back to Emma, his heart still racing, his mind spinning. 6 months. He could do 6 months. Emma grabbed his hand. "Can we go get ice cream?" "It's December, kiddo." "So?" Daniel laughed. "Yeah, we can get ice cream." They left the gym together, and as they walked to the truck, Daniel glanced back one more time. Victoria was still standing by the doors, watching him. She lifted her hand in a small wave. He waved back. And for the first time in a long time, the future felt like something worth waiting for. January hit like a cold slap. The holidays were over, the decorations came down, and the gray monotony of winter settled in. Daniel went back to work with a full schedule: oil changes, brake jobs, an engine rebuild on a '98 Ford that should have been scrapped years ago. Emma went back to school, complaining about early mornings and homework, and Daniel waited. He hadn't realized how much the conversation with Victoria would change things. Not the situation itself, that was still the same, still impossible until May, but the way he felt about it. Before, the distance between them had felt like a wall. Now it felt more like a door. Locked, yes, but temporary. June kept echoing in his head. 6 months had sounded manageable in December. Now in the cold slog of January, it felt endless. He saw Victoria at school pickup most days. They'd exchange brief hellos, careful smiles, nothing that would draw attention. Sometimes Emma would run up to her before they left, chattering about something that happened in class, and Victoria would crouch down and listen with the same patience she gave everyone. Daniel would stand a few feet away, watching, feeling the strange pull of wanting to step closer, and knowing he couldn't. One afternoon in late January, Emma came out of school clutching a flyer. "Daddy, look, we're doing a science fair." Daniel took the paper. It was an announcement for a school-wide science fair in March. Students were encouraged to create projects with parental help. Judging would happen during an evening event, with awards for different categories. "Do you want to do it?" he asked. Emma nodded eagerly. "Can we build something, like a volcano or a robot?" "I don't know about a robot, kiddo, but we can figure something out." That night, they sat at the kitchen table with Emma's ideas notebook, a composition book filled with crayon drawings and misspelled words. She flipped through pages, pointing at various sketches. "What about this?" She tapped a drawing of what looked like a tornado made of glitter. "What is it?" "A weather machine." Daniel squinted at the drawing. "I'm not sure we can build a weather machine, Em." "Why not?" "Because we're not supervillains." Emma giggled. "Okay, then what about a plant experiment? Lily said her sister grew beans in school." "That could work." "What kind of experiment?" Emma thought for a moment. "We could see if plants grow better with music." Daniel raised his eyebrows. "Music?" "Yeah, Ms. Lane told us that some scientists think plants like music. We could test it." Of course Victoria had told them that. Daniel felt a familiar tightness in his chest at the mention of her name, but he pushed it aside. "All right, music and plants it is." Over the next few weeks, they set up the experiment. 3 small pots with bean seeds lined up on the kitchen windowsill. One pot got classical music played from Daniel's phone for an hour each day. One got rock music. One got silence. Emma kept a notebook, recording which plants sprouted first, how tall they grew, whether they looked healthy. She took it seriously, checking the plants every morning before school and every evening before bed. Daniel helped her measure and write down observations, and despite himself, he got invested too. The classical music plant was winning, which Emma found hilarious. "The beans like fancy music," she announced one night at dinner. "Apparently," Daniel said. "Do you think Ms. Lane will like our project?" Daniel paused, his fork halfway to his mouth. "I'm sure she will. But you're not doing it for her, right? You're doing it because you think it's interesting." Emma considered this. Both. He couldn't argue with that. February brought Valentine's Day. Which meant the school was suddenly drowning in pink and red construction paper. Emma came home one afternoon with a shoebox decorated with hearts and glitter, a slot cut in the top for Valentine's. "We're having a party," she said, bouncing on her toes, "and we have to bring Valentines for everyone in the class." Daniel looked at the list of names she handed him. 23 kids. "All right, we'll get cards this weekend." They went to the store on Saturday, and Emma spent 20 minutes agonizing over which box of Valentines to buy before finally settling on ones with cartoon animals, making terrible puns. Back at home, she spread them out on the table and started writing names in wobbly handwriting. "Do I have to give one to Tyler?" she asked, wrinkling her nose. "Yes, everyone gets one. That's the rule." "But he's annoying." "Doesn't matter. Be kind anyway." Emma sighed dramatically, but wrote Tyler's name on a card with a bear that said, "You're unbearably awesome." Daniel watched her work, thinking about the Valentine's Day when Emma's mother had left. Emma had been too young to remember, but Daniel remembered everything. The fight, the cold silence, the way she'd packed a bag and walked out without looking back. It had been 6 years, and he still didn't know where she was. Didn't want to know. Emma deserved better than that. She deserved someone who stayed. His mind drifted, inevitably, to Victoria. He wondered what she was doing for Valentine's Day. If she had plans. If she thought about him the way he thought about her. He shook his head and focused back on Emma. "You doing okay, kiddo?" She looked up. "Yeah, why?" "No reason, just checking." The Valentine's party was on a Friday afternoon. Daniel took off work early to pick Emma up, and she came running out with her decorated shoebox overflowing with cards and candy. "Look how many I got," she crowed, showing him the haul. "That's a lot of Valentines." "Ms. Lane gave us all bookmarks," Emma said, pulling one out. It was laminated with a quote about curiosity and learning. "She made them herself, isn't that cool?" Daniel took the bookmark, running his thumb over the smooth laminate. Of course, Victoria had made personalized bookmarks for a class of kindergartners. Of course she had. "Very cool," he said quietly. That night, after Emma was asleep, Daniel sat on the couch with a beer and scrolled through his phone. He opened his messages and stared at Victoria's name. He hadn't texted her since September. Hadn't called. They'd agreed to keep things professional, and he'd stuck to that. But it was Valentine's Day, and he was alone, and she was probably alone too. He started typing a message, then deleted it. Typed another one, deleted that too. Finally, he just wrote, "Hope you had a good day." He stared at it for a full minute before hitting send. Then he set the phone down and tried not to watch for a response. It came 20 minutes later. "You too. How's the science fair project coming?" Daniel felt something loosen in his chest. She remembered. "Good. The classical music plan is dominating." "Ha! I knew it. Emma's very proud." There was a pause, then another message. "She should be. She's doing great work." Daniel hesitated, then typed, "Thanks for everything you do for her." The reply took longer this time. "It's easy with kids like Emma. She makes it worthwhile." Daniel didn't know how to respond to that, so he just sent back a simple, "Good night, Victoria." "Good night, Daniel." He set the phone down and leaned back against the couch, feeling the warmth of something fragile and cautious growing between them despite the distance. March came in wet and windy. The science fair loomed and Emma's anxiety ramped up. She checked the plants obsessively, convinced that the rock music plant was falling behind on purpose. "Maybe it doesn't like the Rolling Stones," she said one night, glaring at the smallest sprout. "Or maybe it's just a plant," Daniel offered. "Plants have feelings, Daddy." "If you say so." The week before the fair, Emma insisted on making a poster board to display their findings. They spent an entire Saturday cutting out pictures from old gardening magazines and writing up explanations in Emma's careful print. Daniel helped her glue everything down, and by the end, it actually looked pretty good. "We're going to win," Emma declared. "Maybe. But remember, it's not really about winning, it's about learning." Emma gave him a look that said she absolutely did not care about that particular life lesson. The science fair was held on a Thursday evening. The gym was transformed into a maze of tables covered with student projects, volcanoes, solar system models, battery-powered circuits, terrariums. Parents and teachers wandered through, examining the displays, while the kids stood nervously beside their work. Daniel helped Emma set up her project on their assigned table, arranging the 3 plants in a row and positioning the poster board behind them. Emma fidgeted with the notebook, flipping through pages. "You're going to do great," Daniel said. "What if I forget what to say?" "You won't. And if you do, just look at your notes." Emma nodded, but she looked pale. Daniel squeezed her shoulder. "I'll be right here, okay, if you need me." "Okay." The fair officially started and people began circulating. Emma launched into her presentation every time someone stopped at their table, explaining the experiment with increasing confidence. Daniel stood off to the side, watching her with pride. He saw Victoria before she saw him. She was moving through the rows of tables, stopping to talk to each student, asking questions, taking notes on a tablet. She wore a navy blue dress and her hair down, and she looked focused and professional and completely in her element. When she reached their table, Emma's face lit up. "Ms. Lane! Look at our project. Victoria smiled. I've been looking forward to this one. Tell me about it. Emma dove into the explanation, pointing at each plant, showing the measurements in her notebook. Victoria listened intently, asking questions that made Emma think harder about her conclusions. So which type of music do you think worked best? Victoria asked. Classical, Emma said confidently. Because it's calm and peaceful. The rock music was too loud and angry. Interesting hypothesis. Victoria glanced at the plants. But what if we tested different kinds of rock music? Some rock is calm too. Emma's eyes widened. We could do that next time. You could. Victoria made a note on her tablet, then looked up at Daniel. This is really impressive work. She did most of it herself, Daniel said. I can tell. Victoria's gaze held his for just a beat longer than necessary, and Daniel felt the pull again, that familiar ache of wanting to reach out and not being able to. Someone called Victoria's name from across the gym, and she glanced over. I should keep moving. But great job, Emma. I'm really proud of you. Emma beamed. Victoria gave Daniel one last small smile before walking away. Daniel watched her go, then turned back to Emma, who was already launching into her presentation for the next visitor. Later that night, after the awards were handed out, Emma got an honorable mention, which she accepted with only mild disappointment. Daniel loaded the project into the truck, while Emma skipped ahead, clutching her certificate. His phone buzzed as he closed the tailgate. A text from Victoria. She really did do great work. Daniel smiled and typed back. She had a good teacher. I'm not her teacher. You know what I mean? There was a pause, then 2 more months. Daniel's heart kicked. I know, it feels like a long time. Yeah, it does. Another pause, then, good night, Daniel, good night. He climbed into the truck, where Emma was already buckling herself in, and tried to ignore the way his hands were shaking slightly. 2 more months. He could do 2 more months. April arrived with unexpected warmth, the kind of spring weather that made everyone forget winter had ever happened. The trees around the school bloomed in bursts of pink and white, and the playground filled with kids during recess, their laughter carrying through the open windows. Emma's class started a unit on community helpers, which meant a parade of guest speakers, firefighters, doctors, police officers. Daniel took a half day off work when they asked parents to come talk about their jobs. He brought a toolbox and showed the kids how to change a tire on a toy truck, fielding questions about engines and oil changes. Emma sat in the front row, grinning the whole time. When he finished, she raised her hand. Yes, Emma, he said, smiling. Is it hard being a mechanic? Sometimes, but I like figuring out how things work. It's like solving a puzzle. Another kid raised a hand. Do you ever get dirty? All the time, Daniel said, and the class laughed. Afterward, Miss Carver thanked him, and Emma hugged him so hard he almost lost his balance. As they walked out together during pickup, Emma chattered about how cool it was that her dad came to school. All my friends thought you were awesome, she said. Well, you have smart friends. They were halfway to the truck when Victoria appeared, walking across the parking lot with a bag slung over her shoulder. She slowed when she saw them. Hi, she said. Hi, Daniel replied. Emma immediately launched into a recap of the presentation, and Victoria listened, nodding along. When Emma paused for breath, Victoria looked at Daniel. That was nice of you to come in. Happy to do it. Emma's lucky to have you. The words were simple, but the way she said them, quiet, sincere, made Daniel's chest tighten. Thanks, he said. Emma tugged on his hand. Daddy, can we get ice cream? Again? Please? Daniel sighed. Fine, but just 1 scoop. Emma cheered and ran ahead toward the truck. Daniel started to follow, then paused and looked back at Victoria. Hey, he said. She stopped. Yeah? How much longer is the program running? Officially? Victoria's expression shifted, something careful and guarded settling over her features. The last day is May 23rd. It's a Friday. Daniel did the math in his head. 6 weeks. Okay, Victoria echoed. They stood there for a moment, the parking lot emptying around them, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down. I should go, Daniel said finally. Yeah, me too. He turned and walked to the truck, feeling her eyes on him the whole way. That night, he marked May 23rd on the calendar hanging in the kitchen. 6 weeks. 42 days. He could do 42 days. The next few weeks passed in a strange blur. School events, work, evenings with Emma. Daniel fell into the rhythm of it, letting the routine carry him forward. But underneath there was a constant hum of anticipation, a countdown he couldn't turn off. He saw Victoria often, at pickup, at school events, once at the grocery store when they both reached for the same bag of apples and laughed awkwardly before going their separate ways. Every interaction was brief, polite, careful. But there was something underneath now, an acknowledgement, a promise. In early May, the school announced an end-of-year celebration, a picnic on the last day of the program, with games and food and a ceremony recognizing the partnership. Emma was excited. Daniel was nervous. "Are you coming to the picnic?" Emma asked one night at dinner. "Of course." "Good. Miss Lane is going to be there. She's giving a speech." Daniel's stomach flipped. "Is she?" "Yeah, she told us today." Emma shoved a forkful of pasta into her mouth. "She's really nice. I'm going to miss her when the program ends." "Yeah," Daniel said quietly. "Me too." The days ticked down. May 15th, May 20th, May 22nd, and then, finally, it was May 23rd. Daniel woke up early, even though he didn't need to. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, his mind racing. Today was the last day. Tonight, the boundary that had kept him and Victoria apart for 8 months would disappear. And then what? He had no idea. Emma was unusually quiet at breakfast, picking at her cereal. Daniel watched her, concerned. "You okay, kiddo?" She shrugged. "I don't want the program to end." "Why not?" "Because Ms. Lane won't come to our class anymore." Emma's voice was small. "And I like when she's there." Daniel's chest ached. "I know. But you'll still see her around, I bet. And you'll have summer break soon. That'll be fun, right?" Emma nodded, but she didn't look convinced. They drove to school in silence. When they arrived, the parking lot was already filling up with parents and kids. Tables were set up on the lawn, covered with checkered cloths and platters of food. A small stage had been erected near the playground, with a microphone and a banner that read, "Thank you, Partners in Education." Emma spotted Lily and ran off to play. Daniel wandered toward the food tables, feeling out of place. Other parents chatted in clusters, but he didn't know most of them well enough to join in. He grabbed a plate and loaded it with things he didn't really want, just to have something to do with his hands. Nervous? He turned. Victoria was standing beside him, holding a bottle of water. She looked different today, softer. She wore jeans and a light sweater, her hair loose, and there was something unguarded in her expression. "A little," Daniel admitted. "Me too." They stood there side by side, not looking at each other. "Big day," Daniel said. "Yeah." Victoria paused. "End of an era." "You did good work here. The kids love you." "The kids make it easy." She glanced at him. Emma especially. Daniel's throat felt tight. "She's going to miss you." "I'll miss her too." The principal's voice crackled over the microphone, calling everyone to gather near the stage. Daniel and Victoria moved with the crowd, standing near the back. Emma found him and grabbed his hand, leaning against his side. The principal gave a speech thanking everyone involved in the program. Then she introduced Victoria. Victoria walked onto the stage and the crowd applauded. She took the microphone and for a moment she just stood there looking out at everyone. Then she spoke. "When we started this program 9 months ago, I wasn't sure what to expect. I knew we had good technology and good intentions, but I didn't know if it would actually make a difference." She paused. "But standing here now, seeing how much these kids have grown, I can say without a doubt that it did. And that's because of the teachers who welcomed us into their classrooms, the parents who supported their kids, and the kids themselves who showed up every day ready to learn." Her eyes scanned the crowd, and Daniel felt the moment they landed on him. She didn't linger, but the connection was there. "This work matters," Victoria continued, "not because of the technology or the metrics or the funding. It matters because every single one of these kids matters. And if we can give them tools to dream bigger and reach further, then we've done something worthwhile." She finished to loud applause. Emma clapped enthusiastically, jumping up and down. Daniel clapped too, his eyes still on Victoria, as she stepped off the stage. The rest of the picnic passed in a blur. Kids played games, parents ate and talked, and the afternoon sun stretched long shadows across the lawn. Daniel kept losing track of Victoria in the crowd, catching glimpses of her here and there, always surrounded by people. As the event wound down and families started to leave, Daniel helped Emma pack up her things. She was tired, her face flushed from running around, and she leaned heavily against him as they walked to the truck. "Can we come back and visit?" she asked. "We'll see, kiddo." He got her buckled in, then stood by the driver's side door, hesitating. He scanned the parking lot one more time, looking for Victoria. She was standing near her car, talking to Miss Carver. As if sensing his gaze, she looked up. Their eyes met across the distance. Miss Carver said something, and Victoria nodded, her attention shifting back. Daniel climbed into the truck. He'd waited 8 months. He could wait one more day. That night, after Emma was asleep, Daniel sat on the back porch with his phone in his hand. The air was warm, the sky clear and full of stars. He opened his messages and stared at Victoria's name. He'd been thinking about what to say all evening. Something simple, something that didn't put too much pressure on either of them. Finally, he just typed, "The program's over." The reply came faster than he expected. "Yeah, it is." Daniel took a breath and typed, "So what happens now?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, finally, "I don't know. What do you want to happen?" Daniel's heart was pounding. He typed carefully, "I want to see you, if you still want that." The pause felt like an eternity. "Then, I do." "When? Tomorrow?" Daniel smiled. "Where? Same place we met? Marcello's?" "Yeah. What time?" 7? "I'll be there." He set the phone down and leaned back, staring up at the stars, feeling something unfamiliar and terrifying and completely overwhelming rising in his chest. Hope. Daniel stood in front of his closet the next evening, staring at shirts he'd owned for years like they were written in a foreign language. He pulled out the blue button-down, held it up, put it back, tried the gray one, put that back too. "You look stressed, Daddy." He turned. Emma was standing in the doorway wearing her pajamas, even though it was only 6 o'clock. She'd insisted on getting ready for bed early so Rachel could come over without any fuss. "I'm fine," he said. "Is this about your date?" Daniel froze. "How do you know about that?" Emma rolled her eyes in that way kids do when adults ask obvious questions. "Aunt Rachel told me. She said you're going to dinner with a friend." "Yeah, a friend." "Is it Miss Lane?" Daniel's heart stopped. "What?" "Is your friend Miss Lane?" Emma asked again, completely casual, like she was asking about the weather. "Why would you think that?" Emma shrugged. "Because you look at her the same way you look at me when you think I'm not paying attention. Like you're happy but also sad at the same time." Daniel had no idea what to say. He crouched down so they were eye level. Would that be okay? If it was Ms. Lane? Emma thought about it for a moment, then nodded. "Yeah, she's nice, and she likes you." "How do you know?" "Because she looks at you the same way." Daniel's throat felt tight. He pulled Emma into a hug, holding her close. "When did you get so smart?" "I've always been smart, Daddy. You just noticed." He laughed despite himself. The doorbell rang, and Emma squirmed out of his arms and ran downstairs. Daniel heard Rachel's voice, bright and cheerful, and Emma's excited chatter in response. He grabbed the blue shirt and put it on. Downstairs, Rachel was already camped out on the couch with a bag of popcorn and the remote. She looked up when Daniel came down, and her eyes went wide. Well, well, look at you. Don't start." "I'm not starting anything. I'm just saying you clean up nice." She grinned. "Nervous?" "No." Liar. Emma climbed onto the couch next to Rachel. "He's going to see Ms. Lane." Rachel's eyebrows shot up. "Ms. Lane from school?" Daniel glared at Emma, who smiled innocently. "Yeah, the one you wouldn't tell me about back in September?" "That's the one." Rachel let out a low whistle. "And you waited how long for this?" 8 months. "Damn!" Rachel shook her head, looking impressed. "Okay, go. Have fun. Don't overthink it." "I'm not overthinking anything." "You're absolutely overthinking everything, but go anyway." Daniel kissed Emma on the top of her head, grabbed his keys, and headed for the door before Rachel could say anything else. The drive to Marcello's felt longer than it should have. Every red light seemed to last forever. Daniel's hands were sweating on the steering wheel, and he kept running through possible conversation starters in his head, rejecting each one as too awkward or too formal or too desperate. By the time he pulled into the parking lot, his heart was hammering. He sat in the truck for a full minute, trying to calm down. This was ridiculous. He'd talked to Victoria dozens of times. They'd texted. They'd spent an entire evening together 8 months ago, and it had been easy, but that was before. Before the waiting, before the weight of all the things they hadn't said. He forced himself out of the truck and walked to the entrance. The restaurant looked the same as it had that night in September. White tablecloths, flickering candles, the low murmur of conversation. The hostess greeted him with the same practiced smile. "Table for one? Actually, I'm meeting someone." He scanned the dining room and saw her. Victoria was sitting at a table near the window. Not the same table as last time, but close. She wore a dark green dress, simple and elegant, and her hair was down, falling in soft waves over her shoulders. She was looking at her phone, her expression unreadable. Daniel's pulse kicked up. He walked over and she looked up as he approached. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Victoria smiled, small, tentative, real. "Hi." "Hi," Daniel said, his voice coming out rougher than intended. He sat down across from her, suddenly aware of how close they were. No barrier now, no reason to keep their distance. "You made it," Victoria said. "Yeah, traffic wasn't bad." "Good." Silence settled between them, awkward and heavy. Daniel picked up the menu just to have something to do with his hands. Victoria did the same. The waiter appeared, breaking the tension. They ordered wine, red for her, beer for him, and the waiter disappeared again. Victoria set her menu down and folded her hands on the table. "I don't know why I'm nervous. This is ridiculous." "You're nervous?" "Terrified, actually." Daniel felt something loosen in his chest. "Yeah, me too." She laughed softly, and the sound eased some of the tension. "We've done this before. It should be easier the second time." "Should be," Daniel agreed, "but it's not." "No," Victoria said. "It's not." The wine and beer arrived. Daniel took a long drink, letting the cold settle his nerves. Victoria sipped her wine, watching him over the rim of the glass. "So," she said, "how's Emma?" "She's good. Currently at home with my sister, probably eating way too much popcorn and staying up past her bedtime." Victoria smiled. "She's a great kid." "Yeah, she is," Daniel paused. She knows I'm here, with you." Victoria's eyes widened slightly. "She does?" "She figured it out on her own. Asked me point blank if I was having dinner with you." "What did you say?" "I asked if that would be okay. She said yes." Daniel took another drink. "She said you're nice, and that you look at me the same way I look at you." Victoria's cheeks flushed. "She said that?" 6-year-olds are terrifyingly perceptive. Apparently. Victoria looked down at her glass, a small smile playing on her lips. "What way do you look at me?" Daniel's heart thudded, like I'm happy, but also sad at the same time. That's how Emma described it. Victoria met his eyes. "That sounds about right." They ordered food, pasta again, because neither of them had really looked at the menu, and the conversation started to flow more easily. They talked about the school year, about the program's success, about the parents and teachers and kids who'd made it all worthwhile. Victoria told him about the next phase of the partnership, how they were expanding to 3 more schools in the fall. "That's a lot of work," Daniel said. "It is, but it's good work." She paused. "I wasn't sure I wanted to do it again, actually, after this year." "Why not?" Victoria looked at him, something vulnerable in her expression. "Because it was harder than I expected, being around Emma and you, keeping that distance when I didn't want to." Daniel's throat felt tight. "Yeah, I know what you mean." "I almost broke my own rule a dozen times," Victoria admitted. "Every time I saw you at pickup, every time Emma talked about you in class. It would have been so easy to just reach out, say something, but I couldn't, because I knew if I did, I'd regret it. Not because of you, because of me, because I'd hate myself for breaking a promise I made." "What happened?" Daniel asked quietly. "The thing that made you set that rule in the first place?" Victoria was silent for a long moment. She took a sip of wine, then set the glass down carefully. "I was 26, just starting the company. I met someone, a parent from a school, where we were running a pilot program. He was charming, attentive, seemed genuinely interested in the work. We started seeing each other. I thought it was fine. Professional boundaries didn't feel like an issue because I wasn't a teacher. I was just there. She paused, and Daniel waited. But then things got complicated. He started asking for special treatment for his kid, extra resources, priority access to new tools. I said no, and he didn't take it well. He filed a complaint, said I was using the program to pursue personal relationships, that I'd promised his son advantages I didn't deliver. It was a mess. The school pulled out of the partnership. My board almost fired me. And the worst part was I couldn't even blame him entirely. I'd let it happen. I'd blurred the lines. Daniel could see the weight of it in her eyes, the way her shoulders tensed. That's not your fault. He manipulated the situation. Maybe, but I gave him the opportunity. Victoria looked at him. I swore after that I'd never let my personal life interfere with my work again. Never date a parent. Never put myself in a position where someone could question my integrity. And you kept that promise for 4 years. Until you. She said it simply, without drama, but the words hit him hard. I'm sorry, Daniel said. Don't be. I'm not. Victoria reached across the table, and for the first time in 8 months, she touched his hand, just her fingers resting lightly on his. I'm glad I met you, even if the timing was terrible. Daniel turned his hand over, threading his fingers through hers. Me too. They sat like that for a moment, just holding hands across the table, and it felt like something monumental and fragile at the same time. The food came, and they ate slowly, still talking. The conversation drifted from heavy topics to lighter ones. Favorite movies, embarrassing childhood stories, the ridiculous things their respective families did that drove them crazy. Daniel told her about Rachel's relentless matchmaking attempts. Victoria told him about her mother, a retired engineer who still called weekly to critique her business decisions. She means well, Victoria said, but she's also convinced I'm going to run myself into the ground. Are you? Victoria considered the question. Sometimes it feels like it, but I don't know how to do things halfway. Yeah, I get that. They finished eating and the waiter cleared their plates. Daniel expected the check, but Victoria ordered dessert, tiramisu to share, and he didn't argue. When it arrived, they took turns with the same fork, the intimacy of it making Daniel hyper-aware of every movement. Victoria ate slowly, savoring each bite, and he watched her without trying to hide it. What? She asked, catching his gaze. Nothing. Just, I'm glad we're here. Me too. She set the fork down. Can I ask you something? Sure. What do you want this to be? Us, I mean. Daniel's heart kicked. Honestly? Honestly. I don't know, he admitted. I haven't done this in a long time. And when I did, it didn't end well. So I don't have a roadmap or a plan. But I know I want to see you again. And again after that. And I want to figure out what this is without rushing or putting pressure on either of us. Victoria smiled. That sounds reasonable. Does it? Because I feel like I'm making this up as I go. We both are, she said. And that's okay. They finished the dessert and finally paid the check, splitting it this time despite Daniel's protests. Outside, the night was warm, the air filled with the faint scent of jasmine from a nearby planter. They stood on the sidewalk, neither of them moving toward their cars. I don't want this to end yet, Victoria said quietly. Me neither. Do you want to walk? There's a park a few blocks from here. Yeah, let's walk. They fell into step beside each other, close but not touching. The streets were quiet, just a few cars passing by, the city settling into its nighttime rhythm. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, and Daniel felt the tension of the last 8 months slowly unraveling. The park was small, just a patch of grass with a few benches and a fountain in the center. They sat on one of the benches, and Victoria leaned back, looking up at the sky. I forgot how nice it is to just sit and do nothing, she said. You don't do that often? Never. I'm always working or thinking about work or planning the next thing. She glanced at him. You? I'm better at it than I used to be. Emma forces me to slow down. If she wants to spend 20 minutes examining a bug on the sidewalk, that's what we do. Victoria laughed. That sounds perfect. It is, most of the time. Daniel hesitated, then said, Can I ask you something now? Go ahead. What made you reach out? After the picnic? You could have just let it fade, kept the boundary in place even after the program ended. Victoria looked at him, her expression serious. Because I spent 8 months trying to convince myself that the rule mattered more than what I felt. And it did matter. But when the program ended, I realized I was just scared. Scared of getting hurt. Scared of screwing up again. Scared of letting someone in. She paused. But being scared wasn't a good enough reason to walk away from something real. Daniel's chest tightened. Is that what this is? Real? I think so, Victoria said softly. Don't you? Yeah, I do. She reached for his hand again, and this time he held on tight. They sat there on the bench, fingers intertwined, watching the fountain and listening to the quiet sounds of the park. After a while, Victoria said, I should probably get going. Early meeting tomorrow. Yeah, I need to rescue my sister from Emma's endless questions about why adults drink coffee. They stood and walked back to the restaurant parking lot. When they reached Victoria's car, she turned to face him. Thank you, she said, for waiting, for understanding. Thank you for giving me a reason to wait. Victoria smiled, and then, without overthinking it, she stepped closer and kissed him. It was brief, tentative, but it sent a jolt through Daniel that left him breathless. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright. Good night, Daniel. Good night, Victoria. She got into her car, and he watched her drive away before heading to his truck. He sat behind the wheel for a moment, his heart still racing, a stupid grin spreading across his face. When he got home, Rachel was still on the couch, half asleep with the TV on low. She sat up when he walked in, rubbing her eyes. How'd it go? Good, Daniel said, unable to stop smiling. Rachel grinned. Just good? Really good. I'm happy for you. She stood and grabbed her purse. Emma's asleep. She asked about you twice, but eventually conked out. Thanks for watching her. Anytime. Rachel paused at the door. You deserve this, you know. Don't sabotage it by overthinking. I'll try. After Rachel left, Daniel checked on Emma. She was curled up in bed, clutching her stuffed elephant, her face peaceful. He kissed her forehead and went to his own room. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the evening. The way Victoria had looked at him, the way her hand had felt in his. The kiss. His phone buzzed, a text from Victoria. I had a really good time tonight. Daniel smiled and typed back, Me too. Can we do it again soon? Absolutely. When? This weekend? Maybe something during the day? I'd like to meet Emma. Officially. Daniel's heart skipped. Yeah, she'd love that. Saturday afternoon? Works for me. Great. Good night, Daniel. Good night. He set the phone down and closed his eyes, feeling something unfamiliar and overwhelming settle in his chest. Not fear, not doubt, just happiness. The week passed in a blur of work and planning. Daniel mentioned to Emma on Wednesday that Victoria wanted to spend time with them on Saturday, and Emma's reaction was immediate and enthusiastic. Can we go to the park and get ice cream and show her my rocks? We can do all of those things, Daniel said, laughing. Saturday morning, Emma woke him up early, bouncing on the bed with more energy than should be legal before 8 a.m. Is Ms. Lane coming soon? Not until this afternoon, kiddo. Calm down. I can't calm down. I need to pick an outfit. Daniel groaned and pulled the pillow over his head. You're 6. You don't need to pick an outfit. But Emma was already running to her room, and Daniel knew there was no stopping her. By the time Victoria arrived at 2, Emma had changed clothes 3 times and insisted on organizing her rock collection, a shoebox full of stones she'd picked up from various playgrounds and parking lots, on the coffee table for display. She's really proud of those rocks, Daniel warned when he opened the door. Victoria smiled. I'm prepared. She looked different in daylight, wearing jeans and a simple white t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. Casual, relaxed, real. Emma came running into the room and skidded to a stop in front of Victoria. Hi, Ms. Lane. Hi, Emma. You can call me Victoria if that's okay with your dad. Emma looked at Daniel, who nodded. Victoria it is. Okay, Victoria, do you want to see my rocks? I'd love to. Emma grabbed her hand and dragged her to the coffee table, launching into detailed explanations of each rock's origin story. Victoria listened with the same focused attention she gave everything, asking questions and genuinely engaging. Daniel stood in the doorway, watching them, and felt something shift inside him. This was his world, his home, his daughter, his life. And Victoria was sitting in the middle of it, fitting in like she'd always been there. After the rock presentation, they went to the park. Emma ran ahead to the playground, and Daniel and Victoria followed at a slower pace, walking side by side. "She's amazing," Victoria said. "Yeah, she is." "She gets that from you." Daniel glanced at her. "I don't know about that." "I do." Victoria stopped walking and turned to face him. "You've built something really beautiful here, Daniel, you and Emma, and I just want you to know that I see it and I respect it." "Thank you," he said quietly. They kept walking, and Daniel felt the last of his hesitation fall away. This was right. Messy and uncertain and completely terrifying, but right. At the playground, Emma convinced them both to go down the slide with her, and Daniel found himself laughing as Victoria gamely climbed the ladder in her sneakers, looking ridiculous and perfect at the same time. After the park, they got ice cream. 2 scoops for Emma, despite Daniel's earlier promise of just 1, and walked back to the house. Emma chattered the entire way, telling Victoria about school and her friends and the science fair project and a dozen other things. When they got home, Emma announced she was tired and wanted to watch a movie. Daniel set her up on the couch with a blanket, and she was asleep within 20 minutes, the movie playing to an audience of none. Daniel and Victoria moved to the kitchen, keeping their voices low. "She likes you," Daniel said. "I like her too." Victoria leaned against the counter. "This was nice. Really nice." "Yeah." "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "Where do you see this going? With us?" Daniel thought about it for a moment. "Honestly, I don't know. But I know I want to keep seeing you. I want Emma to know you. I want to see where this goes without overthinking it." "That sounds good to me," Victoria said. "But I need you to know something. I'm not going to be perfect at this. I'm going to work too much and probably miss things because I'm distracted. And I don't know how to be someone's girlfriend and also run a company and also be present in Emma's life. I'm going to mess up." "So will I," Daniel said. "I'm going to be overprotective and probably weird about introducing you to people. And I'm going to worry constantly that you're going to wake up one day and realize this is too complicated, but I want to try anyway." Victoria smiled. "Okay, let's try." She stepped closer, and he wrapped his arms around her, pulling her into a hug. She rested her head against his chest, and they stood there in the quiet kitchen, holding each other while Emma slept in the next room. "Thank you," Victoria whispered. "For what?" "For being patient. For waiting. Thank you for being worth waiting for." They stayed like that for a long time, and Daniel felt the pieces of his life, the ones he'd thought were broken or lost, slowly coming back together. Not perfect, not smooth, but real. And that was enough. Summer arrived with the kind of heat that made the asphalt shimmer and turned Daniel's truck into an oven by noon. Emma was out of school, which meant longer days at Rachel's house while Daniel worked, and weekends filled with swimming pools and popsicles and constant negotiations about bedtime. It also meant more time with Victoria. They fell into a rhythm over those first few weeks. Dinners at Daniel's place when Emma was around, quiet evenings at Victoria's apartment when she wasn't. Sometimes Victoria would come to the park with them, or they'd all go to the movies, Emma wedged between them with a bucket of popcorn bigger than her head. Other times, it was just Daniel and Victoria, stealing a few hours alone to talk or cook or simply exist in each other's space without the weight of 8 months of waiting pressing down on them. It wasn't perfect. Victoria's work pulled her away more often than Daniel liked. Late-night calls about program expansions and school board meetings that left her exhausted and distracted. Daniel struggled with letting her into the routines he'd built with Emma. Small moments of possessiveness creeping in when Victoria suggested a different bedtime story or a new way to handle Emma's occasional tantrums. But they were trying, and most days that felt like enough. One Saturday in late June, Daniel woke up to find Emma already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with Victoria. They were drawing together, heads bent over a shared piece of paper, and neither of them noticed him standing in the doorway. "What are you two doing up so early?" he asked. Emma looked up, grinning. "Victoria's teaching me how to draw buildings." Daniel walked over and looked at the paper. Victoria had sketched a simple cityscape, and Emma was copying it in her own wobbly style, her tongue sticking out in concentration. "Looks good," Daniel said. Victoria glanced up at him, smiling. "Morning, I hope it's okay that I let myself in. You gave me the spare key, and Emma heard me and came downstairs." It's fine. Daniel poured himself coffee and sat down at the table, watching them work. This was new. Victoria in his kitchen in the morning, her hair messy from sleep, wearing one of his old sweatshirts that she'd claimed weeks ago. It felt domestic, comfortable, a little terrifying. Emma finished her drawing and held it up proudly. Done. Beautiful, Victoria said. Can we go to the beach today? Emma asked, looking between them. Daniel and Victoria exchanged a glance. They hadn't talked about plans yet, but the idea sounded good. I'm in if you are, Victoria said. Yeah, let's do it. They spent the day at a small beach an hour outside the city, Emma running in and out of the water while Daniel and Victoria sat on a blanket, watching her. The sun was brutal, and the sand got everywhere, and Emma managed to get stung by a jellyfish. Just a small one, nothing serious. But it was still one of the best days Daniel could remember. On the drive home, Emma fell asleep in the back seat, sunburned and exhausted. Victoria sat in the passenger seat, her hand resting on Daniel's on the center console. Thank you for today, she said quietly. For what? For letting me be part of this. Your life. Emma's life. It means a lot. Daniel squeezed her hand. You are part of it. When they got home, Daniel carried Emma inside and put her to bed without waking her. When he came back downstairs, Victoria was on the couch, her eyes half closed. You okay? He asked. Just tired. Good tired, though. He sat beside her, and she leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. They stayed like that for a while, the house quiet around them. I got an offer this week, Victoria said eventually. Daniel's stomach tightened. What kind of offer? A consulting firm in New York. They want me to come on board as a senior partner, oversee their education division. That's big. Yeah, it is. She paused. I turned it down. Daniel sat up slightly, looking at her. Why? Victoria met his eyes. Because my life is here. The company I built is here. Emma's school is here. You're here. She took a breath. And I realized that I don't want to start over somewhere else, not when I'm finally building something I actually care about. Daniel didn't know what to say. He pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her forehead. I'm glad you're staying. Me too. But something in her voice made him hesitate. What is it? Victoria sighed. It's just, turning down that offer made me realize how much I've tied my identity to work. For years, that's all I had. The company, the programs, the goals, and it was enough. But now I have this, us, and I don't know how to balance it. I don't know how to be someone who works 80-hour weeks and also someone who shows up for beach days and bedtime stories. You don't have to figure it all out right now, Daniel said. And you don't have to be perfect at it. You just have to try. I'm not good at just trying. I'm good at succeeding or failing. There's not a lot of middle ground. Daniel smiled slightly. Then I guess you're going to have to get comfortable with the middle ground, because that's where most of life happens. Victoria laughed softly. When did you get so wise? I've had a lot of practice screwing things up. They sat in silence for a moment, and then Victoria said, I love you. The words hung in the air, simple and terrifying. Daniel's heart kicked hard against his ribs. You don't have to say it back, Victoria added quickly. I just needed to say it, because it's true, and I didn't want to wait anymore. Daniel cupped her face in his hands, looking into her eyes. I love you too. She smiled and he kissed her, slow and careful, like they had all the time in the world. July brought thunderstorms and power outages, and a week where Emma got sick with a summer cold that left her cranky and miserable. Victoria came over every evening after work, bringing soup and popsicles and reading books to Emma until she fell asleep. You don't have to do this, Daniel said one night, after Victoria had spent 3 hours sitting on the floor of Emma's room, reading the same story over and over, because Emma kept asking for just one more time. I know, Victoria said, but I want to. It was around then that Daniel realized this wasn't temporary. This wasn't just dating or seeing where things went. This was his life now, reconfigured around someone else in a way he hadn't thought possible. And it scared him. One night in early August, after Emma was asleep, Daniel and Victoria sat on the back porch, drinking beer and watching fireflies. The air was thick and warm, and somewhere down the street, a dog was barking. Can I ask you something? Daniel said. Sure. Do you ever think about having kids? Your own, I mean. Victoria was quiet for a moment. I used to, when I was younger, but then the company took off, and it just never seemed like the right time. And now, she trailed off, looking at him. Why are you asking? Daniel shrugged. Just wondering, I know Emma's not yours, and I don't want you to feel like you're signing up for something you didn't ask for. Victoria set her beer down and turned to face him. Daniel, I knew what I was signing up for when I asked you to sit with me that night. Emma's part of you. I don't see her as some obligation I have to tolerate. I see her as part of the reason I fell for you in the first place. Yeah? Yeah. She paused. But I also need you to know that I'm never going to be her mom. I can't replace someone who isn't here, and I don't want to try. I can just be me. Someone who cares about her and shows up and tries her best. Is that enough? Daniel felt his throat tighten. It's more than enough. They sat in silence for a while, and then Victoria said, What about you? Do you ever think about having more kids? I don't know, Daniel admitted. I never thought I'd get the chance. After Emma's mom left, I just figured that was it for me. One kid, one shot, don't screw it up. And now? Now I don't know. I'm not saying I want more kids right now, but I'm also not saying I don't. He looked at her. Does that make sense? Victoria smiled. Yeah, it does. In mid-August, Rachel threw a backyard barbecue for her husband's birthday. Daniel brought Victoria, and it was the first time she'd meet his extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins, all of them loud and nosy and way too interested in his love life. So you're the mystery woman, Rachel said, cornering Victoria by the grill. I've heard a lot about you. Victoria smiled politely. All good things, I hope. Mostly. Daniel's been annoyingly tight-lipped, which means he actually likes you. Daniel, standing a few feet away with a plate of burned hot dogs, shot Rachel a look. Can you not? I'm just making conversation, Rachel said innocently. Then, to Victoria, he's been different since he met you. Happier, less stuck. Victoria glanced at Daniel, something soft in her expression. I'm glad. The party went late, and by the time they left, Emma was half asleep on Daniel's shoulder. Victoria drove them home, and Daniel watched her from the passenger seat, her profile lit by the dashboard lights. What? She asked, catching him staring. Nothing. Just, thank you for coming today. I know my family can be a lot. They're great, Victoria said. They love you, and they love Emma. That's not a bad thing. When they got home, Daniel carried Emma inside and tucked her into bed. When he came back out, Victoria was sitting on the couch, looking at her phone with a frown. What's wrong? He asked. She looked up. I got an email. One of the schools we're working with is having budget issues. They might have to cut the program. Can you fix it? I don't know. Maybe. But it's going to take time and energy, and I'm already stretched thin. Daniel sat beside her. What do you need? Victoria leaned against him, closing her eyes. I don't know. A clone, maybe? Or 30-hour days? How about I make you dinner and you take a break for an hour? She smiled faintly. That sounds nice. Over the next few weeks, Victoria threw herself into saving the program. She worked late nights, had endless meetings, and came over to Daniel's place looking exhausted and frayed. Daniel did what he could, cooked meals, kept Emma entertained, gave Victoria space when she needed it, and company when she didn't. But he could see the toll it was taking. One night in early September, Victoria showed up at his door at 9 o'clock, her eyes red and her shoulders slumped. I can't do this anymore, she said. Daniel's heart dropped. Do what? All of it. The company, the programs, the constant fighting to keep things afloat. I'm so tired, Daniel. I'm so tired of caring this much. He pulled her inside and held her while she cried, her body shaking against his. He didn't try to fix it or offer solutions. He just held her. When she finally pulled back, her face was blotchy and her voice was hoarse. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to fall apart on you. Don't apologize. You're allowed to fall apart. She wiped her eyes. I don't know what to do. If I step back from the company, I feel like I'm failing. But if I keep going like this, I'm going to burn out. And I don't want to lose this, you and Emma. But I don't know how to make it all fit. Daniel took her hands. You don't have to make it all fit perfectly.